Hello, and you joined us for another Muller Institute Leadership Insights chat. I'm Richard Hill. I'm one of the associates at the Muller Institute, and we've been joined today by Amy Brown, who is another of the Muller family, and a neuroscience expert, speaker, coach, and much more besides. Amy, could you just quickly introduce yourself and sort of say what your main interests are?
Oh gosh, I love the brain. I spend the majority of my time digging through research around what we're now discovering about how it works, because I just think human beings are so fascinating, and we work with organizations and we help them to understand more about how the brain and how their humans work, because so many people say that they're their best asset, they're the most important resource, and yet how much do we actually know about them? So we help to equip them with more understanding so that they can reach their objectives and create environments where people can really do their best work but also flourish.
Yeah, I guess our greatest resource, but the thing that's guaranteed to trip us up and make us falter when we're sort of least expecting it, at least wanting it to. And actually, I mean, just right here and right now, in the situation we're in at the moment, how do you think, how does the brain respond to kind of the sense of isolation and being separate from all these usual dynamics that we're used to experiencing?
There's loads of influences that are occurring at the moment. Some can be very positive, some can be not so positive, and it depends on how each individual is set up. So while we do all have very, a lot of similarities in how our brains work, ever since before we were born, our brains being shaped, and actually it's like the programming that it's being given is unique to all of us. So I know there's been talk around people not using the phrase of we're all in the same boat, because we are actually all journeying through this experience in different ways, and that's very much the case. I really love being on my own. I like quiet, I like to be able to think. And now, my daughter's at home, my husband's at home, and I realized that my daughter doesn't stop talking, and that's somewhat depleting for me, who likes her thoughts to be able to finish, rather than constantly being interrupted. So that's different. And the lady down the road from me, she's very, very social, and she gets all of her social energy connecting with other people, and so she's finding this really, really tough. I'm finding it tough because I'm trying to call people that are socially isolated and trying to be a good person, connecting, but I'm actually talking to more people than I usually do, because a lot of the time I'm cocooned. So depending on how you're set up will be influencing how you're responding at this time. But there's lots of things that can be that I think many people will be struggling with, sort of this low level stress, this low level just raised cortisol levels, which have a profound impact on us. But it's not even right now that the concern is for, from our perspective, it's for the future. So in 6 weeks, in 6 months, because we know the structures of the brain can take some time to change. But what's happening now, and for the organizations that are not being proactive now and actually looking after people in sort of science-based ways, that problem is going to come in about 6 months' time, when people's brains structurally have changed and not been supported in a way that's going to create good mental health, but also good productivity, all of the things that we want from our human beings. If we're not investing in them now, it's going to be down the line. But we haven't even started the official stuff yet.
No,
sorry.
That's fascinating though, because I think it plays into a lot of what we want to, because we're going to be talking about leadership and leadership in general, but the sense that almost something so transitory, I mean, something major and something important, can actually affect our physical sense, our physical structure, our brain. That's really extraordinary to sort of have to think about. And as leaders, wow, that adds another dimension, because we're used to talking about, well, obviously, sort of the productivity side of things, the efficiency side of things, the emotional side of things, but to actually think about we have ways of influencing and supporting people who are going through this other dimension of change, profound physical change, which that's kind of mind-blowing. I've got to say, that's really extraordinary to think about. I mean, how does a leader, sorry.
It started tickling me when I was writing the book Engaged, and I was interviewing all these HR directors, and it was just as we were sort of conversing that I started to get the feeling that they didn't recognize what an impactful role they were having. So I started just at the end of the interview, I was saying, oh, I'm just out of curiosity, do you believe that you are shaping people's brains? And almost all of them said no. And yet, from what we know about the plasticity of the brain, about the influence of the environment, about how much time people spend at work, they are, they're totally influencing. And leaders, how leaders are dealing with the situation at the moment and always, I know there's a big understandably, we're talking a lot about the current situation, but these lessons are evergreen. Leaders have always been influencing people's brains and will always be influencing people's brains. And the challenge is just, are you doing that intentionally? And are you doing that to help wire people's brains to be better at the job and the life that they're wanting to lead? Or are you making them worse human beings?
Yeah. Okay, so taking that then, as a leader, what's the best thing that a leader can do? If you say this is the ingredient of leadership, which you feel is sort of most important to be able to support people in that way, $1 million question, impossible question. I mean, what would it be?
I think it is a really tough question, but I plumbed for trust. I think if you have to have one thing, I think trust. If you don't have trust, I think you're pretty screwed. And I think everything else just becomes far more difficult. So while I would love to say there were lots of other important things, I think there are. I think trust has to be your absolute foundation. We know that it releases oxytocin when people are in a trusting relationship, and we know that that helps to bond people, and in healthy individuals it leads to pro-social behaviors. So I always feel like with trust, if you've got a relationship that's a trustworthy relationship, you get an awful lot from that. So it's this one thing that you can focus on nurturing and creating, and then you get this cascade of positive benefits from it. Whereas if you don't have it, then you're likely to be working in high stress environments, you're likely to have poor engagement, the whole host of negativity that comes if you don't have it. So that would be the one I'd choose.
Yeah, no, I like you sort of bring the trustworthy side of it as well, because trust is that thing that we cannot make. I cannot tell you, you trust me now. It's the thing that's so essential, but actually is almost nebulous in some ways, and it's sort of a whole range of secondary actions that create it. And you can be trustworthy, but you cannot. It's the other person that has that leap of faith. And so yeah, actually being able to engender it into your leadership practices is so hard. I've always kind of felt there's this kind of mixture of responsibility, reputation, results, what people say about you, what you can arguably achieve yourself, and it's almost to be a trusted leader, and sort of we're staying away from kind of like flagpole, trusted advisor, trusted partner, trusted business, trusted all these things. Parts of it is just doing what you do well, doing your job, and do you think that you can create trust by deliberately setting out to create trust?
Yes.
Or is it simply a function of just doing what you're supposed to be doing anyway?
I think you can be intentional about creating trust for sure, and I think you can proactively do things that will then make it more likely that someone can trust you and someone can deepen trust that might already exist. So I often in organizations ask people who here feels that they're a trustworthy individual, and almost everyone's hand goes up. You can trust me. Then I say, who feels that they can trust, say, their immediate manager? About half the hands in the room go up. And then who feels that they can trust the most senior leader, the boss, the CEO, whoever it is? And hardly any hands normally go up. And I think that's just awful. And I don't think it needs to be like that. And I don't know exactly why it is, but I think there's lots of reasons that it could be, and lots of things that the top leadership could do to engender more of these trusting relationships. And some organizations have it, but the majority do not. And so, I definitely think there are things that you can do proactively to build trust. One of the easiest is transparency. So many people do not have alignment. So the values will say one thing, but actually you'll see the behaviors being something quite different. And I love stories like when you hear about leaders in organizations parking their cars at the furthest place from the door rather than the closest place from the door. And that'll link into the next, you'll see why I really like that, because it links into the next question that you're going to ask me at some point.
Okay, in that case, let's get on to that. So there are lots of leadership behaviors, lots of things to pick from, and some of them may be less useful than others or more damaging than others. Or what do you think is either the most overrated leadership behavior that you talk about, or the most damaging leadership behavior? And how does it work? I'm interested. What's got to do with car parks?
So this leadership behavior is not one that I think most people would say, oh yes, we want to have this. So it's not overtly desired, but it seems to be very prevalent, and it seems to be that people are hired when they exhibit this trait. So it's almost like the covert one, but I think it can be really damaging, and I'm hoping that we're going to see a trend of change, especially when we're going through this period now. We're seeing some people really step up and be held up as exemplary leaders, and I don't think they have this thing that I think we will see in some other leaders. I'll leave that to your own personal exploration. But the trait is arrogance. So time and time again, I think we can all, just look around and look at some leaders and go, would I describe them as arrogant? A lot of leaders are viewed as better when they have got a sort of presence and a sort of way of being. And although it doesn't have to be arrogance, I think there can be an amazing presence without being arrogant. I think a lot of times we do see arrogance in leaders, and that has got a host of negative things attached to it. And so what I'm sort of on a campaign to do is to separate arrogance from all of the other good stuff. So yeah, having a presence and being a good communicator and being strong and being decisive. I know you love decisiveness. All of those things you can be without being arrogant. So it's the arrogance bit. You don't actually need the arrogance bit in order to be a good leader, and it can be very damaging to actually be arrogant.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Do we confuse confidence and arrogance sometimes? Do we? And we look at this person who's got that energy and got that certainty, and we say, oh, this confident person, because on that first interaction we don't get it. I mean, what is the line between confidence and arrogance? I mean, it's such a narrow one.
It is a narrow one, and I always revert to the dictionary to see what the dictionary says. For me, feeling someone was arrogant would be when they are saying that they're better than everyone else, or a big red flag would be if they can't say they're wrong. And I see time and time again this just beautiful split between the leaders that can say, I made a mistake, and the leaders that say, oh no, I can't be wrong. That would mean people would lose confidence in me. No, people would have far more confidence in you if they could see that you're human, and that would cascade again positive behaviors of people saying, oh, in this organization we can put our hand up when we've done something wrong and when we can learn from it.
Yeah, so there's a function of self-awareness in there as well, to be able to balance it for yourself. Because is arrogance a learned trait? So where's that question coming from? It's if you've been successful and you've risen and you've risen and you've risen, and then your self-belief grows, and then you're not kept in check by other people, is it something that we cause in others through not checking them, but also we learn ourselves? We build our own confidence and say, I've got this, I know this, I know this, I know this.
I think, again, it depends on where your compass is guiding you from. So I know people that are incredibly successful and incredibly knowledgeable and just brilliant. I would say, yeah, fantastic person, brilliant at their job and lovely human being. And they're not arrogant. They're aware of their skill set. They've got that self-awareness, and they can also speak articulately about, yes, these are my strengths and these are my weaknesses, but it doesn't mean that they're better than other people. And maybe that's the thing about arrogance. I'm not sure. I should have looked up the definition before I started with it. But I think there are ways to journey through life, having people compliment you and hold you up and all of the rest of it, and still retain humility.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder, there's something about how much of a inner voice you have that questions yourself.
Yeah.
So it's balancing in terms of skills and leadership skills development. It's yes, it's doing that externalized, that communication, that projecting, that confident projection, that sort of being able to stand and be certain
Yeah.
about what you're doing and have confidence in your decisions and have the judgment to make those, but also that little voice inside you that's kind of going, okay, what just happened? What just happened? What just happened? And the moment that voice starts going, yeah, you're great, you're amazing, is that the point of turning? Is that where sort of narcissism comes in? And
Maybe. I do believe that, and this is going to be a really bold statement, I do believe all traits can be learnt. I think we
Mhm.
have a genetic predisposition to particular things, but I don't think there's such a thing as being born arrogant. And I think you could train arrogance out of yourself should you be so inclined. But I think
Yeah.
I'm quite unusual in sort of, not in the neuroscience community, but in other communities, I think I can be quite unusual in my views about
Yeah.
personality, and how flexible we can potentially be with developing
Yeah.
that.
No, I'd support you in that, because I think you see it as people, when you've sort of been fortunate in some occasions to watch people grow through a career, their personality does change. It responds to what they're doing, how they're doing. People's life circumstances change. You graduate from university, you buy your first house, you get married, you have kids. You do change as a person as this goes on, and I guess it's if you can take intentionality behind that and
Mm.
recognize a change happens, but then you actually take hold of it yourself and say, I want to make this shift forward, then I think it is a powerful development that you can make. I guess the problem is that ingrained arrogance is one that is unlikely to trade itself out.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest challenges, actually, isn't it? It's because, on the whole, if someone is very arrogant, do they have any inclination to listen to others in terms of their development?
Mm,
That's, yeah, so it's even more sinister than perhaps I'd first imagined. It really is quite a
mm,
undesirable trait.
yeah. So you said that in the current circumstance, kind of feels that maybe this is weeding itself out a little bit, as we're seeing perhaps a little bit more communal empathy, a little bit more understanding of the significance of roles and people. So stepping forward, what would be kind of your ideal, that thinking as we start to reduce distance between us, as we start to return to a normal, not necessarily the normal we already had, in terms of people's behavior and how they think, what do you think might be a good outcome from all of this? And I know it's so difficult to talk about good outcomes when it's such a sort of a massive issue and challenge and tragedy in so many ways. But if we're going to kind of move forward into a new world, where do you think people could head after this?
I think we've got a huge opportunity to be intentional in organisations, and that's why I think it's so important that at times like this, organisations are relying on their trusted people. So the team at the Moller Institute, where people can come and actually be proactively nurturing their
Mm,
employees' brains during this time, so that we don't find ourselves 6 months out in a really sticky situation. So I would hope that this opportunity gives people a chance to go back to the drawing board and just go, in an ideal world, how would we design this company? We now know we can do remote working, to varying degrees of success for sure. But there are things that we thought were impossible before and thought we did, well, that's just not for us. That's those ideas, those fixed beliefs have been somewhat challenged, and I think it's my hope is that, again, in the organizations where you can make it work to work from home, or to allow more people more flexibility, and all these variations that we've seen, I hope that some organizations will really retain those and work on deepening those opportunities, because for some it works amazingly to be able to work flexibly or work remotely. For others, they desperately are craving to get back into some bricks and mortar building
mm,
with others. So I think there is huge opportunities in times of crisis, and I just hope people are not too focused on the now and are able to look forward and to talk to those that they trust to help support them during these times.
Well, thank you. No, I think that's a good point to end on. Thank you so much for your time and talking this afternoon. That's been fascinating, and certainly a few eye-opening points from me. So yeah, thank you very much, Amy, and thanks to everyone who's joined us today for this Leadership Insights conversation with the Wander Institute. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you.